When you think of Virginia Woolf's 1929 essay, A Room of One's Own, it's easy to just file it away as a cornerstone of feminist literary criticism. But if you stop there, you're missing its real genius. This essay is a masterclass in how to build an argument, one that completely sidesteps traditional, straightforward logic. So today, we're not just going to look at what Woolf argues, but the revolutionary way how she does it. And it all starts with this, right? This one, deceptively simple, and now incredibly famous line. This isn't just a catchy title, it's the entire thesis in a nutshell. 500 pounds a year, which was a solid middle-class income back then, and a room with a lock on the door. For Woolf, this is the non-negotiable material foundation for any kind of creative freedom. But this raises a huge question about her method. Woolf isn't writing a legal brief or a scientific paper. Her whole approach is fluid, it's subjective, it's deeply personal. So how on earth does she manage to build such a convincing and even universal argument from material that feels so, impressionistic? That's the big question we're going to dig into. And here's the key. Woolf challenges the whole idea of a single, capital T, truth right from the get-go. She's not here to hand you a neat conclusion on a silver platter. Instead, she invites you, the reader, to come along on the intellectual journey with her. The process of thinking, with all its twists and turns and dead ends, that becomes the argument itself.
Okay, so how does she guide us on this journey? Well, her first and probably most critical tool is the creation of a narrator, a persona who acts as our guide and our stand-in.
She calls her Mary Baton, but then she immediately tells us the name is totally arbitrary. This narrator could be anyone, she says. By creating this fictional voice, Woolf does something incredibly clever. She separates the argument from her own life story. Mary Baton's experiences, her thoughts, her frustrations, they aren't just Virginia Woolf's. They're presented as the kind of experiences any woman might have trying to think and create in a world not built for her. Now, Woolf doesn't just leave this character floating in the abstract. No, she grounds her in the real physical world. We don't start with high-minded theory. We start by watching the literal physical barriers that Mary Baton runs up against in her search for knowledge. Our narrator pays a visit to Oxbridge, which is this fictional mashup of Oxford and Cambridge. And the men's college? Wow. It's a fortress of tradition and wealth. She describes it as this perfectly functional, self-preserving organism, constantly renewing itself with money and influence. It's not just a school, it's a whole ecosystem of power that women are completely shut out of. And then she uses this absolutely brilliant metaphor, a tale of two meals. At the men's college, Mary has this amazing lunch with fantastic food and wine, and the conversation is just sparkling with ideas. But later, at the fictional women's college, dinner is just plain, thin soup. The contrast is so stark. Woolf is saying, look, the quality of your thoughts is directly tied to the quality of your dinner. You can't expect genius to flourish when it's being starved. And then comes the iconic moment. The narrator tries to walk into the college library, but she's stopped by a guard. Nope, you're not a fellow, and you don't have one with you. That locked door is one of the most powerful symbols in the entire essay. It's not just about one woman being kept out of one building. It stands for centuries of women being systematically barred from the very institutions of knowledge, history, and literature. So from the very real deprivations of the present, Woolf then pivots her argument back into history with what might be her most famous and frankly devastating thought experiment. She asks a very simple but incredibly provocative question. We all know about the genius of William Shakespeare. But what if he had a sister, let's call her Judith, who was just as brilliant, just as imaginative, just as drawn to the stage as he was? And then Woolf just maps out Judith's tragic and inevitable fate. Unlike her brother, she's denied an education. While he goes off to London to make his name, she's promised in marriage against her will. So she runs away to pursue her dream. But when she gets to the theater, the men in charge just laugh in her face. A woman on stage? Get out of here. Eventually, she's taken advantage of, becomes pregnant, and, in despair, takes her own life. Her genius completely snuffed out. Now, this isn't just a sad little story, it's an incredibly powerful, damning argument. Through Judith, Woolf makes these huge abstract forces like patriarchy and economic dependency feel personal and visceral. She shows us that female genius wasn't just missing from history, it was actively destroyed. So after laying out all the social and material barriers, Woolf makes another brilliant leap. She connects the social argument to an artistic one. She realized it wasn't just rooms and money that women didn't have. They didn't have a literary tradition of their own either. She starts talking about the need for what you could call a female sentence. And she's not talking about biology here. She's talking about experience. The traditional ways of writing, the very structure of sentences that male writers had perfected, were designed to express a male point of view. For a woman trying to write about her reality, Woolf argued, those tools just didn't fit. And what's so amazing is that the very form she's describing is exactly what she creates in a room of one's own. Instead of a single, bossy voice making a linear argument, Woolf gives us something way more radical. The text is impressionistic, it's fragmented, it has many voices. It deliberately blurs the lines between fact and fiction, and it invites us into a much more complex, shared experience of finding the truth. And this brings us to the philosophical core of her entire project. Because the way she writes her essay isn't just a stylistic choice, it's the physical embodiment of her deepest argument about what truth even is. Ultimately, what Woolf is doing here is bigger than just arguing for women's rights. She is launching a full-on attack against the very idea of a single, objective, male-defined truth that had pretty much dominated Western thought for centuries. At its heart, Woolf redefines truth as something that's subjective, something that's based on experience. She isn't giving us a list of facts to memorize. Instead, as one critic put it, she's showing us her experience and her perspective and suggesting that this subjective point of view is just as valid, just as truthful as any so-called objective fact. So her writing becomes this reconstruction of a fragmented, multiple reality. By showing us truth as a mosaic of different perspectives, instead of some single solid stone tablet, she completely changes our role as the reader. We're no longer just passively receiving information, we're invited to become active participants, to help piece together the fragments and create the meaning with her. And this is where everything clicks together perfectly. The aesthetic argument and the political argument become one. This new, fragmented, subjective way of seeing reality is precisely the kind of model you need to make space for all the stories that have been left out of history. It creates a form where the ghost of Judith Shakespeare can, at last, begin to speak. What Woolf showed us, so powerfully, is that how a story is told is completely inseparable from who gets to tell it. By creating a new way to argue, she created a new space for what could be said. And that leaves us with a question that echoes almost a century later. Whose voices are we still not hearing? Whose stories are still out there, just waiting for the money, the time, and the room to finally be written?